Certainly by his own book. Chelsea are not all that happy about it. We're going to ask Kev if Paul Scholes is the solution to all things Wales. Of course, it'll be interesting for us because games of importance coming up against Wales over the next bit. Potentially Ronaldo to United, and if we've time, if he doesn't ramble on too much, we'll ask him a little bit about Declan Rice as well. Kev, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How you keeping?
I'm Brand, good man. From the broadcast point.
That's especially for you, Adrian, that this morning.
Here, Jose Mourinho, right, signed up to 2020, may well be 2021, which would already well outstrip the usual sort of 3 or 4 years that he, or even 2 or 3 years that he tends to remain at clubs. I was reading a thing over the last few days, 442, the football magazine, in the middle of last year, had him at 5th in their sort of overall power rankings, the top 50 managers on the planet at the minute. And I kind of was interested to get your thoughts about where Mourinho currently sits in that overall sort of power ranking, and the extension of that is that if he were to leave United, how many of the top clubs would actually be looking for this guy?
Well, there's been talk quite recently, hasn't there, of PSG again, and PSG, it does seem there's a bit of a power struggle in that dressing room, and it would probably take someone of the character of Jose Mourinho to go in there and maybe with a bit of a controlling influence over that dressing room. That would maybe seem the ideal destination, you would think, if he were to leave Man United. That looked on the cards before he signed his contract. In relation to where he is in the world standings at the moment, you have to look at it probably where he is in Premier League standings. You'd probably think, certainly from an attacking point of view, certainly from watching a side, watching a team go out and play, I would probably put him as in third behind Guardiola and Klopp at the moment. You could even argue maybe Pochettino as well. Certainly from a pleasing on the eye perspective, that's the way you'd maybe look at it. But I think Jose Mourinho would simply look at it from the fact is, well, look, we're second in the Premier League. We are way behind Manchester City. He's probably pointed to the fact is that Manchester City have spent more money than them. I'd look at the fact is that that's not necessarily always the case, because Man United's wage bill is as high, if not higher, than Man City at the moment.
Is this older, more melancholic version of the previous form of Jose Mourinho we are now seeing? Is he more concerned with his legacy? Does he feel a sense of nostalgia about parts of his career now and wants to create more of a dynasty than his usual 3-year stint at clubs?
Well, he's definitely more concerned about his legacy. He's always been concerned about that, Owen, hasn't he? I think we see that throughout his career. He's constantly reminding us all of how many trophies he's won. And I spoke about this only in the last couple of weeks. You only need to look at United when they won the Europa League last season. Jose was on the stand when the trophy was being lifted, and he was signalling three trophies. That's what they'd won across the course of this season. So I think, in general, I think you only need to look at that fact. You only need to look at that fact is he is more than concerned about his legacy. In general, when he's been at clubs, he's won a tournament, or certainly won the championship, won the league title in his second season. That is not going to be the case this year. So there'll be more pressure on him next season. And I think regardless of the contract, if he hasn't won the Premier League come the end of next season, you'd probably feel as though he'll be, maybe the suggestion would be that he'll be walking away anyway.
Antonio Conte, we all kind of expect, is going to leave Chelsea probably at the end of the season. He was another one of those managers who might have been in the frame for that PSG gig. And it's kind of interesting this week. So he's been a bit hacked off suggestions that he's suggesting himself that he's not got that much input in club transfers. And that it's been driven by executives. Like, on the one hand, Conte dictating the pace, maybe here ahead of a little bit of his own departure and kind of maybe creating the narrative to his own his own needs, obviously. But on the other hand, a bunch of suits at Chelsea aren't happy with him. Who cares?
Yeah, Nathan made actually a decent point regarding Conte last night in the Chelsea.
In itself is a rarity, Kev. So yeah, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, that's why it sticks in my mind, because this only happens once every year or so. But the point he made was, why would Chelsea change the structure of the club that they've used over the last 10 or 15 years, particularly under Abramovich? They've got a transfer policy in place, and whether or not people agree with maybe letting Ancelotti go over the last few years, letting Mourinho go after they've won titles, and even if you look at Roberto Di Matteo when they let him go after he'd won the Champions League, regardless of what we think about that, the structure's been in place that's been geared towards success. You only need to look at last season. I think there was a suggestion last year that all wasn't quite right with Antonio Conte. He signed a new contract, but we fully understand the way that Chelsea have gone about things. Their transfer policy has been in place, and the manager has to come in and fit in around that structure. He knew full well before he came into Chelsea that was always going to be the case. The problem being now is that he feels as though they are maybe not delivering the right type of player, or the right kind of player, or the right calibre of player that he would want at the club. And it's been plainly obvious this season that they've had a few issues when they've had the injuries. When Conte was injured through the early part of this season, they struggled in the midfield. There's obviously an issue with David Luiz as well. There are issues defensively as well when we know Chelsea last season was so good. So and not least up front, Diego Costa, I feel as though that they have not replaced him necessarily, and there have been the problems throughout, and I think he knows that.
It's a very easy get-out clause as well. It strikes me that like he gets to say, well, these players weren't, the greatest players in the world. I didn't really sign them. And also the timing of it is a bit bizarre because they're actively in the market for Dzeko and Palmieri as well. Like, it's wait until the end of the window, you don't get your players, and then you have a bit of a cut off them.
Yeah, but it's easier though during the window. Then, of course, it puts more pressure on them to get the players that you would want. Out of the players they have been linked with, certainly from the striker's point of view, perspective, should I say. Then you almost look, Dzeko you'd feel be the best option. But I'm with you what you said there, Adrian. I think it's almost like a get-out. I think Conte knew full well the arrangement when he went into the club. You coach the team. That's the arrangement across most top European clubs, the way that Chelsea have gone about things. And I think he maybe put up or shut up. It feels to me, though, that the writing's on the wall for Conte, yeah.
Matt Dickinson is making the point in the Times this morning that Carlo Ancelotti is probably the most amenable man in football, that, as you say, he shut up and put up and was very, very successful. Do you think that there's another manager that exists at a top level in European football like Ancelotti that can be very, very successful while also being very, very agreeable?
Well, there's none that stick in my mind straight away. I think if you're looking for a manager that's going to come in and has had that recent success of going into a club, of just getting the team, first of all, just get them playing for you. He's done that wherever he's been. It didn't necessarily work at Bayern because he'd worked at such a high pace and at such a certain, or in a certain way under Pep Guardiola, that it was difficult then for the team to revert back to a different type of method. But it looks to me that if Conte were to leave, he's the ideal man, though. And yeah, there's no one else that's maybe. I mean, you're looking at Thomas Tuchel at the moment. There's still talk of Bayern with him going in there. I don't know. There aren't many names around at the moment that spring to mind that you would say that they're the ideal replacement if Conte were to leave.
Some talk this week, Kev, that Paul Scholes is going to join Ryan Giggs in the Wales coaching staff. It's definitely one of the more bizarre stories and would be absolutely fascinating from our point of view if it was to come off. I was actually thinking about it. Now, Paul Scholes, like,
how would you be fascinated?
Because they're two interesting. Is that the way to put it? Interesting characters for very different reasons.
I thought merely to his hair colour, that was all. But
I'm all for the gingers. Here, I think the common perception of Paul Scholes, and to be fair to him, he does kind of hammer this home every time he appears on the TV, that he's not necessarily the most effervescent, brilliantly communicative person, but at the same time I could actually see that he would be really good on the training pitch.
It strikes me that he would have to be very, very good on a one-on-one basis, certainly that individual side of it, how he's going to maybe coach different players in certain situations that could arise on the pitch. It's a bold move from Giggs. Yes, he's got someone that's very, very trusted to him, but again, you're getting someone that lacks maybe the certain knowledge and the certain know-how of how certain associations would work. Certainly, it's very, very different from club level, but certainly from the actual player's perspective, how well does he actually know the Welsh players himself? So he's got to get up to speed with that, yes. I would think there'll be someone else within Ryan Giggs' coaching staff that have got an appreciation for the Welsh FA, that's certainly got an understanding of the Welsh FA, and a majority of the squad as well. I think that is a necessity for Ryan Giggs to get that right. But certainly for Paul Scholes, I think it is quite intriguing what you're saying. I think it certainly gives a bit of spark around Wales, and if he can get that one over the line, I think it'll be excellent for them. Yeah.
You look at the Ryan Giggs appointment at Wales and potentially Scholes coming in there, but especially looking at Phil Neville and his appointment of the England women's team. And I can't quite make my mind up whether the class of 92 are the most entitled bunch of footballers that have existed or the most overrated bunch of footballers when it comes to potential management roles that have ever existed. What do you think?
I think maybe Manchester United, ex-Man United players in general do seem to get the pick of the job. You only need to look across the course of the last maybe 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it would be. Since Sir Alex Ferguson has gone into Man United, every single player that's left, it always seems to be saying, have you learned from what Alex has said? Or are you going to go on and you're going to take it forward? You only need to look at the amount of ex-Man United players that's still within the game that have worked under Alex Ferguson. But in general, there's an element to what you say is maybe true. None of that group of players have necessarily gone on and had huge success. Nicky Butt's having, by all accounts, good success within the youth structure at Manchester United. But in general, it hasn't necessarily all gone to plan. You can tell they're all very, very strong-willed. That's been instilled in them from the young lads. That strong will might come across as a little bit of arrogance at times to a lot of the players, and not necessarily that humility that's needed to be a success in modern day coaching and management. So I think this is a big test for Ryan Giggs. This is a huge test for him to first of all to get on side with or maybe get his reputation back on track. First of all, is what I would say. Secondly, I would think maybe his coaching credentials have maybe called into question on a number of occasions, so he's got to get that back on track too. I
think as well that he bringing somebody like Paul Scholes in some ways, while he might be good around the training pitch, he's going to be, I mean, the two of them know each other extremely well. I think that Ryan Giggs probably needs somebody there in the way that Martin O'Neill has Roy Keane, that I think he's going to need somebody there who's going to say to him, listen, this isn't the right call, and is going to challenge him and is not going to be a yes man. And I mean, I don't know Paul Scholes intimately, but you might suggest that given their history that he might not be exactly that person. And I know he's confirmed a goalkeeping coach, I think, who was there in the previous regime, and nobody else has yet been confirmed. Listen, let's hope he gets it all spectacularly wrong and we go ahead and win that Nations League, Kev, that we all love.
No, I would just say, well, we won't go on the Nations, but at that point you've made those perfect. He will definitely need someone alongside him to tell him that isn't the right decision, that isn't the right call, and Paul Scholes certainly strikes you as that individual, yeah. What about the Nations League then? What were you saying there?
Go on, give us an explainer there, Kev. We've only got another hour and a half to fill. Go on. What have you got?
No, we'll leave that for another day. I'm quite calm in my explanation there during the night.
You might have been very calm. It didn't mean that it made any sense.
All right, okay. Okay, did you understand it?
Not at all. No chance.
Do you understand it in general?
No, I thought I knew it, and then I listened to you, and then I was totally confused.
All right, go on then. Come on. Honest to God.
One final point, Kev. Jose Mourinho saying that Cristiano Ronaldo is a wonderful player and every manager would like to have him. At what point does Jose Mourinho start using the media to up his interest in Ronaldo? Because obviously he wants to bring him back to Manchester United.
I mean, I'd probably put the point out there. Would you pay 100 million right now for Cristiano Ronaldo, given the form that he's in? He's certainly haven't. If anyone's been watching Real Madrid, which I'm sure a lot have, we've been watching Real Madrid in the last few weeks, the last couple of months. He seems to be having a strop constantly. I watched the game last weekend against Deportivo, and you only need to look at Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale, he put Real Madrid in front to put them 2-1 ahead in the game. He scored an absolutely beautiful goal. And Cristiano Ronaldo's celebration alongside him, it was embarrassing. It really was. He's clearly not happy with things that are happening at the club. Now we have heard the suggestion that this tax issue may be the problem, maybe the issue, maybe his problem. But in general, he's not happy on the pitch. I think his demeanour stinks when it's on the pitch at the moment. I think his body language stinks, and I think in general, I think that's manifesting across the team. And it seems to me that could be, or certainly in my eyes, and I'm watching it, that could be a problem for Zinedine Zidane, and that's something that he desperately needs to address, given that they've got these huge Champions League games against their PSG on the horizon now.
Very quickly, Kev, finally, Declan Rice, so obviously a guy that we've been speaking about over the last few weeks since he came into that West Ham first team and really impressed everybody around him. But it seems now Gareth Southgate has been speaking about him. He's on their radar. The technical director has been, checking him out, sort of, are we going to get this guy in? Like, how do you expect this thing to go? I know he was talking to Nathan after one of the West Ham games a few weeks ago and was talking about looking forward to getting back in for, he said, the squad, whether that was the senior squad or not, who knows, in terms of the Ireland setup, I think in February or March. What way do you expect this one to play out? Like, this is a concern, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we'd spoken about it. Keith obviously spoke about it on his show yesterday. Nathan and I and even Richie spoke about it to an extent last night as well. I read Dan McDonald's piece today, which was very good in the Indo. I was maybe, I mean, Dan's piece this morning maybe struck me a little bit, because we were talking about it in maybe hypothetical last night, and then all of a sudden now it becomes a reality when Gareth Southgate starts mentioning that he is actually on the radar for England. At the moment, we've got to take Declan Rice at his word. That's the way that I would look at it. But we have been stung before. We know with Jack Grealish, with what happened, it does get alarm bells ringing as soon as Gareth Southgate is starting to talk about a player that we know is of high class, and he is probably going to go on to have a really good career in the game, certainly at club and international level. If he decides to declare for England, I'd rather he did it sooner rather than later. If not, and he is committed, fully committed to us, which it does seem to me he actually is, because he has shown an indication that, look, I've been part of the international senior setup before. Certainly was part of the squad when they were training over the last year or so with Martin O'Neill. If that's what he wants, I think it needs to be clarified fairly quickly, because the longer it drags on, the more uncertainty is going to come around this, and I think that puts more pressure on Declan Rice as a player himself as well. So I just want clarity sooner rather than later on this.
Kev, Sam has been in touch. He wants to make the Kev's Fridge weekly segment.
Is that right? Is
there any reason for us to have another look inside the Kevin Kilbane fridge this week? Is it still stacked full of chocolate and Lucozade?
Well, I'll tell you what, I will actually show you, right? No, I will. I've got to pick my laptop up here now as well, but I will actually show you. The thing is, this week, right, the fridge hasn't actually changed in the last week.
It's still the same, is it? The eggs are still there, yeah.
Yeah, there's the eggs. Yeah. There's the Corona and the Becks.
Oh, you haven't even drunk the beer.
Well, there was more to the beer than we initially realised.
I don't get a chance to drink it.
Wow.
And there you go.
The chocolate's taking a bit of a hit, yeah.
Yeah, the kids were around last week, so that's taken a hit because of them.
Good man, Kevin. Get yourself down to the shop. Good man.
Yeah, all the best, lads.
Thanks a lot. Take it easy. Kevin Kilbane there, on the line from Kevin Kilbane Towers, and still hasn't managed to get himself to the supermarket, is the short story there.
It's like a kitchen from Grand Designs, those high ceilings and those kind of big windows in the ceiling.
We could definitely do one of those.